Hey guys, and welcome back to reality. Kind of. I'm Rob, an Enneagram 963, social self-preservation. Today I wanted to look at Contraflow and Synflow, an idea that's often talked about in the Enneagrammer universe. It's something I wasn't really familiar with until about a year ago, and I hadn't looked too closely at it until just recently. The idea is that three of the stacking, social self-preservation, self-preservation sexual, and sexual social, create barriers between themselves and others, while self-pres social, sexual, self-pres, and social sexual all move towards others. I think for some of these stackings this intuitively made sense to me, but for others I sort of needed to dig into exactly why that is, and I'm gonna tell you guys what I found in this video. So let's get into it. So for the purposes of this video, I'm gonna think of social as air. Social is kind of the space between us, managing that, forming new connections. It's also sort of looking at society from a large scope. So you're sort of looking down and seeing how we're all sort of connected. One of the themes that often comes up in collages is just kind of like cityscapes. So you can think of that as like seeing how we are each connected. Self-preservation is more about structures, building something like a cave, for instance, and managing the resources that you're taking in and out of that cave, trying to make sure that you have what you need to survive. There's a sense of practicality and groundedness with self-preservation types compared to those that are blind to it. And I like to basically think of self-preservation as managing the space that we live in. So that's represented simply by a cave because it's very earthy. Sexual I have represented by a lightning bolt. It's sparks flying off. There's a sense of intensity in the air with the sexual. It can be seen as shocking. It's also potentially flashy in terms of drawing attention or repulsing attention away. Sexual can also have a permeating electricity, like shooting through your body kind of vibe to it. So that's why I have the lightning bolt here. So when we combine these together, we have social self-pres and self-pres social. Social self-pres is starting from that elevated view and kind of looking down at the earth, right? And so it's kind of starting with these lofty ideals and then thinking, how do I ground these? Kind of taking the lofty ideals of social and thinking, how can I ground this into something in reality? How can I structure it in some way? I think a good example of this is like a monument. So you're taking some idea, you're representing something, and then you're casting it into iron, like literally, and saying like, this is something that our society cares about. We're going to represent it in a way that will stand the test of time. But there's also tools and other things like that that social self-pres is really trying to implement. So what makes that contraflow? Well, so social starts with I'm connected to everyone, right? But then it's also containing that within some kind of structure. It's sort of putting people to work, handing them a shovel, saying like, this is something that we care about, let's go make it happen. Social self-pres is trying to stabilize social ideals. It's avoiding closeness by metaphorically buttoning up, but also sometimes literally like putting on a suit and taking on some form of role is very social self-pres, in that like I'm doing this thing, this is who I am in society, and this is what I represent. Social self-pres, in short, is adding the coldness of the cave to the warmth of the air. So it's closing off. Conversely, self-pres social is about exiting the cave and into the air. So it's developing something inside the cave and then bringing that out into the open air. A good metaphor for self-pres social is like a market. So everyone's kind of bringing what they have and then sharing it. You're moving from this closed off arena to the open arena of social. So this is one of the ones that was more straightforward to me. So hopefully it will be for you too. Self-pres social is just pure, I take care of me and then I move out and I provide for others as well. By providing for others, I also get things that can help me. Trading resources is very just self-pres social in a pure form. And like we do it all over the place. So as the most common stacking and Synflow, it should be fairly straightforward. All right, now how does social interact with sexual? So sexual social is adding elevation to the spectacle of sexual display. So you're sort of creating space between yourself and most other people. You can think of this as like look but don't touch. So I'm doing my thing over here, and you all can look, but you can't touch because it's elevated, right? I am in some way above you. The sexual energy isn't coming to the ground. It's up in the air. By adding social to sexual, it's adding an audience for the performer. Conversely, you can think about social sexual as starting elevated and then kind of raining the electricity down. So it's kind of interacting with the ground and in a way that sexual social is not, because it's pointed downwards. So the sexual energy from social sexual is actually permeating around the ground in a very chaotic way. It is like the actual thunderstorm, right? It's creating a path of chaos that actually impacts the people below. The final contraflow stacking we have is self-pres sexual. Self-pres is containment, structure, going inside your cave, maintaining your cave, right? When we introduce sexual to that, it's adding intensity within that cave, as opposed to self-pres social, as we saw earlier, where they're exiting the cave out into the open air to exchange resources, right? They're really just adding intensity to their own self-pres. You can think of this as digging underneath the earth. Grave digger is one of the things they often talk about with self-pres and sexual, metaphorically speaking, of course, for the most part. But you can think of it as intensity like you would with the sexual instinct, but towards their own self-pres interests. So really that lack of social here is keeping them inside the cave. The self-pres is their main desire, and the sexual, adding to that, simply intensifies that desire. Conversely, sexual self-pres is moving towards others in that they have this intense permeating energy, right? And then they're invading other people's self-pres. They see this realm as more their play zone, right? Using their sexual energy to permeate others' caves. In doing so, they're moving towards others without fear of the social instinct. They're bringing their intensity and closeness to the self-pres realm, and they're not worried about causing ruptures in the social realm because that's something that they're blind to. They're just not thinking about that. They're working to meet the sexual needs in the realm of self-pres and not worried about the closeness. So it's very intense in that way because they aren't worried about suffocating, because air is not a concept, right? Metaphorically. So where sexual social was elevating before, sexual self-pres is just getting right into the ground and permeating all the holes it can find. You might think, why doesn't sexual self-pres not move towards others, just like self-pres sexual doesn't move towards others? Because there's just no social, there's no like desire to be with others, right? It's kind of like having no filter, in that it's just willing to roam around and wants to be seen. There's still an element of sexual, of wanting to be seen, but doesn't really have the elevated view. It's just on the ground. I want to be seen on the ground. So in summary, we have 3 Contraflow stackings and 3 Synflow stackings. The Contraflow stackings are social self-pres, basically taking social and containing it in some way, creating a boundary, a wall around the social group. Self-pres sexual has their cave and is redirecting that sexual energy back into their own cave, so they're not leaving. So it's kind of contained energy. And sexual social is taking energy and sort of elevating it, a form of a spectacle, right? So it's away from others, creating a wall of air, essentially. Then with the Synflow stackings, we have self-pres social, where you're taking a cave and then you're leaving and going out and exchanging goods with others, and that's supporting the self-pres instinct by creating these social connections, right? Then you have social sexual. With the social sexual, you have this elevated sense of connection, and it's shooting off sparks towards the ground, so it's moving towards others, trying to permeate those others, creating an intimate closeness. And there's no barrier like there is with social self-pres. And then sexual self-pres, similarly to social sexual, is taking sexual energy and bringing it to others. And there's no social wall there. There's no air between. It's very close and intense. So they're moving towards others again. All right, guys, that's all I have for you this time. I hope you liked it. If you did, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. You can also check out my blog at subjectivepersonality.com, as well as follow me on Twitter at subjectivePblog. All right, until next time, see you guys. creating a wall of air, because air is not a concept, right?